friends. So in my last video I have tried to explain what the term modernism and modernity stands for. What does the term postmodernism and postmodernity mean? Why Habermas said that modernity is an unfinished project, and why Lyotard said that postmodernity is an incredulity towards meta-narratives. So all these things will be discussed in this short video. So let me begin with the question, why modernity is an unfinished project for Habermas? So for the modern philosophers, especially the Enlightenment thinkers, reason is very important in making progress, not only for making progress, but also in emancipating the human beings. But the question is, was it successful? So here, I think we would like to have a brief account of the rise of critical theory or the Frankfurt School, and how these critical thinkers, they analyze the ambiguous nature of progress and why they take this question of progress as a central point of the inquiry. Now, the first generation critical theorists, including Theodor Adorno, they believed that it is true that modernity was characterized by a reason, but rationalization led to progress and domination. So there is some problem with the reason, because reason led to some sort of a manipulation and domination of the nature. But when it came to second generation critical theory, thinkers like Habermas, who represents second generation critical theory, he could see that it is not the reason that is creating the problem, or perhaps the problem is not reason as such, but how we have used the reason. So he came up with a method of immanent criticism. So Habermas observed that the modern thinkers were perhaps using or seeing reason as instrumental reason. And what is the solution to that? So if we supplement instrumental reason with communicative reason, it will end up all the problems. Now, what is instrumental reason and why it is problematic? Let us see. Now, instrumental reason, as was taken by the modern philosophers, that led to manipulation and domination of, especially of the nature. So traditional theoretical knowledge that gives information about the world. So here, of the instrumental notion of reason, it's subsumed to categories and concepts. So a subject or a scientist applies concepts to an object, or maybe in the natural or the social world. And what is the aim of such an instrumental reason? The very aim is to control and manipulate society, to control and manipulate nature. So social life is simply objectified. So everything is measured according to their usefulness. So that is the fate of instrumental reason that is being taken up by these modern philosophers. But Habermas says that knowledge must be viewed not as instrumental but as communicative. Communicative reason is intersubjective, and its aim is shared understanding and consensus. So the very method of communicative reason is a domination-free dialogue in public sphere. So here there is more of subject-subject relationship. It's not something like subject-object relationship. And an inbuilt ideal of freedom and equality is inherent to social relations. And he very much gave importance to discourse, that is a rationally motivated consensus that creates interest in mutual understanding. So communicative reason eventually gives way to communicative action, and that results in the interaction in the life world. In this context, the very notion of public sphere, as dealt by Habermas, also must be mentioned. Public sphere is a space where subjects participate as equals in rational discussion in search of truth and common good. So it continues to exert a critical and legitimating function on the political and economic systems. Public sphere also enables the creation of a truly democratic institution. And according to Habermas, the very notion of public sphere, and if we put it into practice, but public sphere, it will solve a number of problems central to society, morality, politics, and law. Thus, a communicative rationality is reinforced by commitment to otherness. This is what we require for the contemporary societies, and in the view of the postmodern thinkers like Habermas, this was truly lacking in the modern societies. And again, Habermas would like to account for the renewal of historical materialism. And in this context, he makes a distinction between work and interaction. Work or labor, according to Marx, is a historically developing mode of production, which stands as the basic category of historical materialism. And labor, in fact, works on instrumental reason. Habermas says that work must be distinguished from interaction. In interaction, there is mutual understanding between subjects, or there is subject-subject relationship. And interaction and not labor or work gives room for proper communicative action because it's the domain of values and norms. And in this context, the observations of Frederick Jameson must also be added. Jameson defends Marxist theory as a critical discourse. According to Jameson, Marxism is not only a critical discourse but also a master discourse. A master discourse which is free of the absolutistic concerns. Now, Marxism, according to Jameson, is a perspective and a method whereby the false and the ideological can be unmasked and made visible. That's why he says that Marxism is a critical as well as a master discourse. Now, moving on to the second aspect, or these views of Lyotard on postmodernism. Lyotard says that modernity is characterized by a lot of narratives. Now, what is a narrative? Narrative is like a storytelling. That is, someone telling someone else that something happened at some place or some situation. So this storytelling or this narration is not only there in literature, but it is there in every discourse. So different types of narratives are used in different discourses according to Lyotard. And if we look at modern science, modern philosophy, for that matter, any discourse in the modern age, it is characterized by a lot of narratives, and these narratives are again led by meta-narratives, or they are steered by meta-narratives. What's a meta-narrative? These meta-narratives set the rules for narratives. And among the meta-narratives, there come grand narratives also. Now, what is a grand narrative? A grand narrative is a meta-narrative, but it is that which points towards future. So meta-narratives form the basis of modernity, and Lyotard observes that in the history of modern Western philosophy, we can find two grand narratives. One is the speculative grand narrative, and another one is the grand narrative of emancipation. Now, the speculative grand narrative can be attributed to Hegel, and which is based on absolute truth and which aims at reason. And the grand narrative of emancipation we can attribute to Marx, and which operates on justice and which ultimately aims to attain freedom. Now, Lyotard observes that when we come to the age of postmodernity or postmodernism, we can see that grand narratives or meta-narratives have no appeal. This absolutistic universalistic meta-narrative or grand narratives, they don't have any more appeal. And in place of these meta-narratives, we do want mini-narratives. I can say why Lyotard says such meta-narratives or grand narratives have no appeal in this postmodern context. Because today, in terms of knowledge, what we need is perhaps performativity and productivity. So, it is really a doubt to see whether these meta-narratives or grand narratives could provide such productivity and performativity of knowledge. So according to Lyotard, in place of such grand narratives or meta-narratives, let us have some mini-narratives. Now, decentering of this subject is a key idea of postmodern thinking. The postmodern philosophers or the post-structuralist thinkers like Derrida, Foucault, all these people, they question the privileged philosophical or political status of the subject. We can find a variety of forms of moral and political individualism. Perhaps Marx tried to transfer the privileges to a collective historical subject, thus a decentering of subject occurs there. Then moving on to Hans-Georg Gadamer, an intersubjective medium of understanding and language is put forward by him in the context of hermeneutics, because the subject or the author is no longer the authority. In this context, the dictum of Roland Barthes may also be mentioned. Barthes speaks of the death of the author and the birth of the reader. Difference of Derrida or the deconstruction of Derrida, which takes a critique of the binary oppositions like man, woman, nature, culture, etc. That is prevalent in the modern philosophical thinking. So that is being questioned. So all these lead to some sort of a decentering of the subject. Again, for Foucault or Michel Foucault, what is a subject? A subject is a formed and deformed product of social and psychological conditions. So he tried to explore the links between the philosophical subject and subjections to power. with all these things, we can say that postmodernism is a critique of the intellectual universe of modernism. So if we compare with the pre-modern times, it is true that modernity was characterized by a lot of good tendencies like emphasis on reason, emphasis on the freedom of the individual, and the project of modernity is coming up with a lot of hopes and ambitions. How to emancipate the human being, not only from the dominations of religion, but also from other sorts of power dominations. But the question is whether modernity was a successful project, whether it was a finished project. If not, why? And the very beginnings of postmodernism, or the very project of postmodernism, we can say, or the very movement of postmodernism, of course, it provides a radical challenge to history because it questions the basic categories of Western philosophy. Thank you.